In late 1991, at the peak of the grim and gritty era of comics, Marvel would present an oddly entertaining beam of light in their Marvel Superheroes anthology book in the form of Doreen Green, Squirrel Girl. Yes, Squirrel Girl. The story saw Doreen staging a faux attack on Iron Man in order to audition for the Avengers. In addition to sporting prominent incisors and a prehensile tail, she also had the ability to communicate with squirrels, in particular a favorite named Monkey Joe. Doreen's powers were derived from a genetic abnormality, which meant she was allowed to proclaim she was a mutant, until this was later revealed to not be the case. Yes, this is something Marvel has done in recent years, most notably with the Children of Reed and Sue Richards, Franklin and Valeria, where characters born with genetically altered DNA, which results in them having innate superpowers, not being mutants, despite the fact that Marvel spent decades referring to them as, well, mutants. Iron Man turned down the audition, pointing out that Doreen was 15 at the time and far too young to join the Avengers. However, the two were then interrupted by Dr. Doom, who neutralized Iron Man's armor and took him hostage. However, the despotic ruler of Latveria would soon be overwhelmed by an army of squirrels and run off crying. Yes, in her first adventure, Squirrel Girl beat up Dr. Doom. And no, this was not a Doombot. This was really Dr. Doom. This was supposed to lead into a follow-up story that would see Squirrel Girl audition to join the Fantastic Four, only to be turned down again, but that unfortunately never really made it out of the pitch phase. Instead, Doreen would show up in a parody of Marvel's 2099 imprint as Squirrel Girl 2099 in a grimmer, grittier fashion than her more fun-loving debut. However, shortly after that, she basically fell into obscurity. Then, in 2005, writer Dan Slott would bring Squirrel Girl back to the forefront as he revived the Great Lakes Avengers for a 4-issue miniseries. The Great Lakes Avengers were a not-so-thinly veiled swipe at DC's Justice League books at the time, which were in a very humorous bwahaha mode. So this featured a group of very lesser superheroes, like Flatman, basically a two-dimensional Reed Richards, Big Bertha, a supermodel who could control her body fat, Doorman, a living portal through whom people could just pass through into another room, and of course Mr. Immortal, who immediately revived shortly after being killed, the latter of which you may remember from Marvel's She-Hulk series on Disney+. One of the running plot threads to the series was that the group was constantly looking to expand membership as previous members kept getting killed off, some of whom had literally just joined the group a few pages earlier. One of these new members would be Squirrel Girl, but unfortunately would come at a very high cost as her beloved Monkey Joe would be killed off by a Dr. Doom fanboy with a leather fetish. Thankfully, Doreen would soon find a new friend named Tippy Toe. After that, Doreen would defeat Thanos and eventually return to New York City to attend college and become chief au pair for Danielle Cage, daughter of Luke Cage and Jessica Jones. Also, she had sex with Wolverine at some point. I don't know why things like this keep becoming a running plot thread on this show. You may remember that Squirrel Girl seemed poised to be one of the next breakthrough characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, with her being in a New Warriors television series being developed for Hulu. In the series, she was going to be played by actress Milena Vaintrub, best known for playing Lily Cooper in a series of ads for AT&T Wireless. She would also be prominently featured in a female-centric Marvel animated series, being portrayed as a bestie of Kamala Khan. Now, the New Warriors pilot didn't sell, however, Vaintrub would eventually continue to be associated with Squirrel Girl, both in cosplay form and in the form of an audio podcast that was based on the very series that we're covering today. So the ongoing Squirrel Girl series began in 2015 and immediately received a lot of acclaim for being much lighter fare than was being published at the time. And that's what we're covering today, the first volume of this series, from writer Ryan North and artist Erica Henderson. This is the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, Volume 1. Squirrel Girl hangs out in Central Park, working on her non-trademark infringing theme song and breaking up a mugging. From there, it's back to Avengers Mansion, where she can change for her first day at Empire State University, covertly stopping another holdup along the way. As Doreen steps onto campus, she immediately begins turning heads, mainly due to the fact that her attempts to conceal her tail have resulted in her having a badonkadonk.
Look like two big Christmas hams.
Doreen briefly flirts with a guy named Tomas, who seems to relate to her in some innate way, only to be interrupted by Tippy Toe, who's upset that Doreen is constantly trying to conceal her powers. Doreen proceeds to not notice much of anything about Tomas as she books it to her dorm room where she meets her new roommate Nancy Whitehead and Nancy's secret cat Mew. The secret pet is enough for Doreen to allow Tippy-Toe into the room, only to suddenly receive word of an incoming invasion in the form of Kraven the Hunter entering the campus grounds. The Spider-Man foe takes Tippy-Toe hostage, causing Squirrel Girl to leap into battle and immediately get incapacitated by getting trapped in a net. Thankfully, Doreen is able to call together a grouping of squirrels to help her escape, with Tippy-Toe revealing that Kraven had been kicking her due to a recent loss to Spider-Man. Doreen owns a series of trading cards that were created by Deadpool that contain information on pretty much every hero and villain in the Marvel Universe on them. Doreen is able to pull up Kraven's card, revealing that he is now immortal since his resurrection in Amazing Spider-Man. To that end, she suggests that Kraven go after larger game, like Gigantos, a massive humanoid whale. This is enough to make Kraven leave of his own accord. However, that's not the end, though, as Tippy-Toe has recently learned from a squirrel at the Baxter building, the Fantastic Four is out of town, that apparently Galactus is heading back to Earth and will need to get some more information on this. Still, there's orientation and club registration to attend, even if Nancy doesn't necessarily want to, as she's not very social, and in fact all she really wants to do is just start a Mew-focused fan club with Doreen. Tomas is also there as he's part of the fencing club, and this leads to more flirting with Doreen while Nancy is getting a tattoo. However, that in and of itself winds up getting interrupted as Tippy-Toe arrives again to inform Doreen that Galactus will be arriving some point in the next 2 hours. So Doreen has to take off to Stark Enterprises to borrow a squirrel-centric Iron Man armor that Tony Stark had commissioned as repayment for the whole Dr. Doom incident. She soon takes off to go face off with Galactus, only to be spotted by Whiplash, who immediately pulls her down with his whip. There have been multiple villainous individuals to have worn the moniker of Whiplash. The first was Mark Scarletti, an electrician turned criminal. The second was Leanne Foreman, a mutant who had energy whips containing a series of gauntlets on her wrist. And then there's the third Whiplash, Anton Vanko. Yes, the one from Iron Man 2. He was in a Ukrainian village that was attacked by someone in an Iron Man suit, and one of the victims was Vanko's father. Though Anton knows that Tony Stark was not in that Iron Man armor, he still blames Stark for the creation of said armor, so he managed to get a copy of the armor and reverse engineered it into his Whiplash suit. Squirrel Girl removes her armor and puts it in recovery mode and takes on Whiplash. She attempts to inform the villain about Galactus' arrival, but he's not having any of it, even going as far as to tear up Doreen's Deadpool card. Finally, she calls on Tippy-Toe and friends to overwhelm Whiplash, only to then be informed that a nearby bank is being robbed and that Nancy has been taken hostage as she was using the ATM for cash in order to buy a falafel. Wishing to conceal her identity further, Squirrel Girl has a battalion of squirrels form squirrel armor as she crashes into the bank. She makes quick work of the bandits, who only brought weapons to counter the Hulk, Captain America, and Wolverine, and soon frees the hostages, with Nancy spotting Tippy-Toe as she leaves. Squirrel Girl then exits the squirrel armor, which keeps fighting at her behest, as the iron squirrel armor is now fully recharged and ready to go off and fight Galactus. Soon, Squirrel Girl and Tippy-Toe are taking selfies on top of Galactus' seemingly unconscious body. Well, that was fast. In reality, it took quite a bit of work for Doreen to get the attention of Galactus to settle on the moon to begin some negotiations. Of course, Squirrel Girl is just one tiny little squirrel girl, and Galactus is a giant cosmic entity, so communicating is kind of hard. Finally, Doreen manages to make physical contact with Galactus, which utilizes the power cosmic to kick in the Universal Translator mode. Galactus is once more without a herald and beginning to run low on energy, so a sneak attack on Earth seemed like a really good idea. And they really don't have too much more in the way of negotiations, so it's off back to work. Thankfully, Squirrel Girl manages to launch herself onto Galactus' ship and access the navigational computer to learn the truth. In reality, Galactus just kind of wants Earth's heroes to detect him again, so that way they can be routed to a new planet that they can sustain themselves on, which is usually what happens whenever Galactus arrives on Earth. However, Doreen has managed to find an even better option, a planet populated only with nuts, which are super packed full of energy, and can sustain Galactus for much longer than eating Earth will. After consumption, Galactus goes into a minor food coma, which explains the selfie from earlier, and then gifts Squirrel Girl a new Galactus trading card. Doreen then rushes back to Empire State University, where Nancy fills her in on the day's lecture, and the fact that she knows that Doreen is actually Squirrel Girl. Still, she'll keep the secret, but only if Doreen allows her to spar in the new squirrel armor. The one made of squirrels, not the Iron Squirrel suit. This technically ends the volume. I mean, there is a reprint of Squirrel Girl's first adventure from the Marvel Superheroes issue, but we covered that at the beginning of the show, so there's no real reason to get into it here. Anyway, that does conclude the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Volume 1. How was it? Well, I think the artwork is really nice. It's cartoony, but it's cartoony in a good way. It definitely keeps the lighter tone and the more fun that's being had in this. There's some really good characterization through all this. I like a lot of the banter between the characters. I like that Doreen is presented as a well-rounded person. She's not a completely naive superhero, but she's still also, faults and foibles to the general emotions of humanity at times. And, again, her interactions with the squirrels are really fun, and everything is just really fun and light overall. And I do think there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of good things in this. This is a really good all-ages book. There's one part that maybe gets a little, I hesitate to say raunchy, but yeah, there's a scene of Doreen changing that's played in there, but other than that, there's nothing too salacious there. If I really have a complaint, it's that it's too short. The story arc is only 4 issues. Like I said, the 5th issue is just the reprint of Squirrel Girl's first appearance. So, yeah, unfortunately, there's just kind of not much there. It makes the Galactus face-off look a little lackluster. I mean, we build literally 2.5 issues, basically, to get to that, and yeah, and then it's just kind of like, oh, she just finds another planet for him, the end. And then that was kind of it. I wish there maybe had been a 5th issue. I would have liked to have seen more interactions with her and Nancy and also Tomas. I think that would have worked a lot. I think just that would have maybe helped build it up a little more. A little more world building, I think, would have really helped this. In fact, I know there's an omnibus edition of this out. I don't know if it's still in print, and it would be pricey, but if you were interested, I would maybe recommend going more that direction, even, if you do have to pay a little bit more money. Still, though, this is a fun read and a good one overall. I am going to be giving The Unbeatable Squirrel Girl Volume 1 an A. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review. Hey guys, remember you can support my work at patreon.com/CP Time for Cat Productions, where you can even request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. Also, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so that you can be notified for further videos.